The Nesting Place, a novella by Robert S. Wilson, read for you by Scott MacDonald. Ginger was always an obedient collie from the time she was just a pup. Were she anything like those mutts next door, Art wouldn't have given her behavior a second thought. A warm, heavy summer's breeze blew from the east as he took her for an evening walk. The heat had been exhausting lately, and his arthritis was acting up again. They headed down Sheldon Street side by side. Ginger panted along, grinning ear to ear, her shaggy coat blowing in the wind. As they passed Dead Man's Hill, her head bolted up, sniffing the air in the direction of the looming hill. Before Art could do anything, she pulled him from the sidewalk and nearly dragged him to the top of the slope, barking and yelping the entire way. "Ginger!" His age-swollen hand let loose, and Ginger, free of his grip, ran upward, leaving him to fall at the edge of the incline. She half raced, half waddled up to a bare spot in the grass, 3/4 up, leash dangling, nose to the ground, sniffing with the intensity of a cocaine addict. Art struggled to his feet and brushed the dirt from the brittle mess of gray hair on his head, faced back down, and yelped again. "Oh, what the hell is it, girl?" Art pushed his way toward her, mumbling to himself, "What?" Ginger circled the spot, howling in an unbearable tone. Art just watched, unable to understand what was wrong with his dog. She barked and dug furiously at the same time. He tried yelling again, but she didn't respond. Instead, she continued assaulting the ground with her paws and Art's ears with her howls. Art stood there a moment, gave up, and pulled out his dog whistle. He had only ever used it once, and it had worked quick as fire. He put the whistle up to his mouth and blew with all the air he had. Ginger kept barking and digging. Art rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. He took a deep breath and blew into the shiny silver whistle again. This time, slowly, Ginger stopped digging and looked up at Art, reluctant to meet his eyes. She turned and let out a random yelp here and there at the now deep pit she dug in the ground. Art pulled a bone from his shirt pocket and held it over her nose. Her eyes mostly focused on the treat, but shifted anxiously to the hole and back every now and then. He backed away, bone held out, and slowly she began to follow him down the hill. Tying her leash to the tree nearest the street, Art gave her the bone and patted her on the head. She dropped down to her belly, paws outstretched before her, and started to gnaw at it. Art looked her over a moment and scratched his head. He climbed back up the hill and stood over the hole Ginger had made. Kneeling down, he sifted through the dirt. A faint voice murmured in the distance. Art turned to look back at Ginger. She didn't seem to notice him as her jaws opened and closed, sharp teeth cutting away at the bone. While his head was turned, that faint voice rustled again. Strange, he thought. The first time, it sounded like it came from across the street. But now? From the top of Dead Man's Hill, one could see a good couple miles off, over the roofs of houses, and into the forest that bordered the neighborhood about a mile back. Must have echoed off those houses. He stood up and climbed to the top of the hill. There was nothing but several hundred acres of desolate cornfields ahead. That faint murmuring came from behind him again. He turned and went back to Ginger's hole. Maybe, just maybe, he thought. Gently lying on the ground, he put his right ear, the good one, in the hole as deep as he could without getting dirt all over his head. Silence. He felt like an old fool. He was about to sit up before somebody spotted him listening to the ground when the murmuring started again. It was clear enough this time to make out several things. 1. The voice belonged to a man. 2. The man was screaming. And 3. Oddest of all, the man's voice came from under the ground. Art's heart leapt. He pulled his head out of the hole and took a deep breath. "Hold on, buddy, I'll call for help," he yelled at the ground. He fumbled into his pants pocket for his cell phone. Cindy had made him promise to keep the stupid thing with him at all times. She had bought it for his 70th birthday and kept up the bill ever since. Not that he ever used it. He hated the damn thing. She kept telling him someday it would come in handy. He swallowed, annoyed that she had been right and anxiously waiting for someone to answer the phone. After all, this was his first time using the godforsaken thing and his second time calling 911. When Sheriff Hadley arrived, Art was standing on the hill. As the sheriff approached, Art stumbled down, dusted off his pants, and waved away the officer's outreached hand. He had known Hadley since the sheriff was just a little boy. Hadley now towered over him. "Hello, Hardy. Sorry I couldn't get here. He's in there, Jimmy. Come quick." Art waved back toward the hill. "Let me get this straight, Art. You think someone is inside Dead Man's Hill?" Art blushed with frustration. "Jimmy, just do us both a favor. Humor an old man, and go up to that big old hole there." He pointed out Ginger's handiwork. "Put your ear in there and listen, okay?" You've been listening to The Nesting Place, a novella by Robert S. Wilson, read for you by Scott MacDonald.